This is was my 1964 Volkswagen Trug, or Volkswagen Bug Beetle conversion, Bug Truck conversion rather. I started this early this year, and I unfortunately had to get rid of it. I was on eBay late one night, as you do, eBay and Craigslist late at night, and this popped up. Some pictures of the eBay listing. Um, this was in Lake Tahoe. I live in Oakland. At the time, I had space in a warehouse for a project. I was looking for something interesting to do. Wanted something cool, something unique. I had been looking for Beetles for a while. I always liked Volkswagen Beetles, Bugs, Baja Bugs, projects, trucks. Um, Never really seen a truck conversion. I have now seen a few. At the time, I had not seen this, so this was pretty cool, pretty unique. Um, the original listing, I can't find the exact listing. It's I can't eBay doesn't save it anymore, but it read something like, "This is a Survivor Volkswagen Caddy conversion. Overall, in general, good shape. Seems to be original interior." It was late at night, and I was super excited to see um, this Volkswagen Beetle. It was 1964, pretty rare. It was on eBay. There's only one day left on the auction. There was no reserve. It was at $500. Oh, it's a pretty cool car. So I bet on it. I won. About a week later, I picked it up in Tahoe. I had it towed. Um, from the pictures, it looked pretty decent. Um, I could tell. Obviously, the bed was plywood. Um, and I was like, well, it's plywood. Uh, and some sort of aluminum. I couldn't tell if this was solid plywood underneath or aluminum and what was going on. And I figured, well, it's got dual Webers. Um, it's supposed to run great. It's supposed to drive good. It's a 64 Beetle. There doesn't seem to be any major rust. All the metal work has been done on the cab. And I might have to remake a bed, drop it down, do something cool. And I think, it's a pretty good starting price for the price. It's pretty cheap. Well, relatively cheap. And yeah, I mean, of course, by the time I won the auction, paid the auction fees, got it towed, all that, not so cheap. But um, what it turned out to be is a 1964 body, or what's left of the body, on a 71 pan, standard Beetle pan, with a 69 transaxle 4-speed manual, with a 71 1600 dual port engine, dual Weber straight pipe dune buggy exhaust. It took me a little while, a little bit of research. I found some documentation in the car, and just redoing some research and an insurance slip. I found out that this had been built in Oklahoma at about 2009, 2010. It was the owner's son of the construction company. He built it, or someone built it. That's who it was registered to. It then somehow made its way to Southern California. The dates are a little bit fuzzy. It seems like it probably sat in Oklahoma for a few years. It then made its way to a car dealership via an estate sale, and then it made its way to South Lake Tahoe, where I bought it. The last previous owner said he was going to swap a later body onto the pan, but I don't know if he was just lying or just hadn't taken a good look at it. Yeah, so these are just the pictures, and this is all the eBay listing photos. So what I had to go on when I was bidding on it. And, it seems like the pan was pretty good. I could see some tech screws, but And then this is what I found when I got it. um, it the wiring is horrendous, and it sort of would start. It would fire right up, but getting it to crank, of course, none of the gauges worked. Nothing worked in it. No lights or anything. I think one of the headlights worked. Um, it was converted to 12 volts for the most part. None of the indicator bulbs were 12 volts. They were all 6 volts, but they weren't hooked up anyways. The headlights were converted to 12 volts and a few other things. It was mostly extension cords. Um, it was extension cords and wire caps and house wiring. Um, all kinds of wrap and tape connections where you essentially just this is a super unique one that I've never seen, but essentially you just take bare copper, you push the two wires together, and then you tape over it. It's a very poor connection, can cause lots of problems, lots of connectivity issues, can also cause fires. Um, this was a splice that had no reason to be made. I mean, there's a reason that these terminals are the way they are. They're designed to link together, but this is a main battery coming back from the alternator. It's spade with a screw through it, and then it's extended about another 2 inches for some reason. Like they couldn't just crimp onto the wire. And then this isn't even one wire, it's actually 2 wires that are put together, and the insulation's all cracking off. Almost all the insulation on the wire, the original wiring was actually in decent shape, but all the wiring that was added was just cracking and falling apart. It was really, really bad. There's a giant wire cap on the starter, great place for it. Yeah, just a mess. Um, the previous owner had also installed a stereo, and I say installed in quotes because he put these speakers in cardboard boxes, and you can see the wiring just coming through here too, and just right through the interior. And of course, it wasn't sealed. This thing was just full of water, and this speaker box was just garbage, and he just literally set it in there, ran the speaker wire across the floor. Yeah, pretty bad. Um, so the bed was actually fairly impressive. I mean, it had probably over 200, tapped holes in the aluminum angle. So someone put a lot of effort into it, and the whole thing is actually supported. You can see one of them here, and one was back here. Just 2 half-inch all thread on either side was all that supported the bed, and I believe there was 1 or 2 wood screws that went into the back of the cab, which, mind you, the top of the cab is actually fiberglass, and the back is plywood and mat board, and this entire thing is just being supported by 4 all thread, which kind of impressive. Underneath the bed, though, was actually slatted angled aluminum, very well reinforced, just mounted very poorly and very questionable decision making. Someone obviously had put a lot of effort into building this bed, and building the whole car, really. Just poorly, just effort put in the wrong places. You can see the fiberglass and the Bondo is just splitting apart because the wood underneath is just rotting. This actually right here is a thin piece of metal that was actually nailed onto the wood underneath. It was pretty bad inside. I mean, you could just poke this and it just fell apart. You can see under here where the metal, so this was metal and this was metal right here, and it was cut, and this is all fiberglass on top. Originally, a Volkswagen roof would actually go up, be domed a little bit, and this is actually flat. It actually has a cool look, but it's fiberglass, and not fiberglass can be great, but not when it's not adhered right, and it's not adding any structural rigidity, and it's just being allowed to flex. And of course, the wood underneath is expanding and rotting, and this was just completely separated underneath the strip tray, which this was actually metal. This was wood. This was just a piece of plexi with some untreated wood around it. A close up right here. This is actually not rotten, surprisingly, and actually a very clean cut. I don't know if the 64 was in an accident or rotten or smashed or what originally. I know it was rotten, but this is just a picture of it in Oakland. There's some of the rot. It's kind of hard to tell in this picture, but there's actually just pieces of metal just tacked on with nails on the front here. This actually whole thing is completely rotten. Surprisingly, they put in a new pan gasket, which boggles my mind why you put a new pan gasket when the metal doesn't even touch each other in most of the spaces because it's just completely rotten. The brake hoses were also extended. You can just see them just some hoses slapped on because of course having a 71 pans, the dual master, 64 would have had a single, so there was only one hose. This is the fuel line. You can see there how the fuel line just stops. It just fell apart when I took out the tank. There's another one of the patch panels where there's just a bunch of tech screws and just complete rot under here. A lot of the car was like that, just patch panels over rot that were painted over. The floor pans look good in this picture. Well, that's because there are floor pans that are just tacked, literally tech screwed over the rotten floor pan. If you can see over here, the heater channel on this side doesn't exist at all. And instead, there is a piece of metal that's just bent over. How much you know about Volkswagens, but the body bolts through the heater channel, which is part of the car. The heater channel carries heat from the engine into the interior and also supports the bottom of the door jamb and structure of the car. This is completely missing, and over here they had filled in the void because the body doesn't touch the pan anymore, the chassis. So they filled it in with spray foam, which of course is not structural. And there's nothing bolting the body over here because there's nothing for it to bolt into. It's just hollow. This side is the heater channel's there, but it's completely rotten. There's big holes all through it, but it was attaching what's left of the body. And this is metal. Just this part is metal. Underneath is wood that's just tacked over, and then it's actually nailed through. But this is just sitting on top of a rotten floor pan. This actually does have some rot holes in it, and this is the seat rails. These are the seat rails, and there's like one screw in each rail holding down the seats. Yeah, this is it. It's extremely useful. It's still a useful thing, even though the bed was ridiculous. It's poorly done. So the original plan was just to fix up the engine, get it back on the road, and drive it and customize it in the future. But this is before I actually received it. Once I received it, I realized how bad it was. Wiring is no problem to me, but everything needed to be gone through. The engine ran like complete crap because one carburetor is completely full of corrosion. The other one needed rebuilt. Both of them needed rebuilt. The linkage was not set up correctly at all. The throttle cable was sticking. The clutch was not set up correctly. There was no bushings left in the entire shifter assembly. That's what I did here. Pulled it out, replaced the shifter bushings, greased everything. The engine was, like most Volkswagen engines, but this one was extremely bad. There was probably at least a quarter-inch of oil just caked on the entire engine. It leaked from every possible place, including the rear main seal. Just problem after problem after problem. If I would have had the space like I had originally planned, I would have definitely totally kept the car and finished it, because it's still a really neat car. And even though there's a ton of rot, I can replace the floor pans, I can weld in new metal, and I can make it really cool. So, this is a volt gauge. This is the gauge cluster I put in to replace the panel. There was just this little crappy volt gauge, which by the way was connecting to nothing. It was just in there. For some reason there was a resistor in line. I have no idea why. I guess maybe when it was 6 volts. But this was my gauge cluster. This is the vintage beige autometer gauges. They actually looked amazing. Clock and voltmeter, tachometer. And then I took apart the original speedometer. There's original 64 speedometer still in it. And I cleaned it up and replaced the gels. It actually looks fantastic. This is the engine when I got it. I did replace the alternator. I pulled it out, went through it, cleaned it up, replaced all the push rod tubes. It actually had great compression. It was fantastic. The oil pump had a ton of wear in it, though, unfortunately. I went through, cleaned it up, gave it a refresh. This is with the old push rod tubes. MP stainless exhaust. And unfortunately, shortly after this, I lost the space that I originally had it in, which was my work. You can see on the ground. I left it one night, and even though it drained most of the gas, what was left of the gas leaked out, and my work was not very happy with me, so I had to move it out of my work. I moved into a different warehouse space, and unfortunately, I had to move out of that warehouse space. So, kind of had to hold the project. You can see the gap underneath. This was just foam just shoved in the gap because yeah, but this is what the end goal was to recreate, not so much the fifth wheel hitch, but Volkswagen. I've only been able to find these two photos, this and the one after this. Volkswagen apparently had these beetles they converted at the factory to run parts from plant to plant. It's really cool. This is what I would aim to recreate. I haven't seen anyone recreate this yet. There may have been somebody, but I haven't seen it. I'm sure these are long goss. These are something like 50 Beetles. I'm by no means any Volkswagen expert, but something like a 50s Beetle. And they're really cool. Of course, I'm sure these are absolutely long gone, but I'd love to see somebody recreate this. I'm gonna put in a video clip after this that really shows off just a complete walkthrough of it and the rot.